All right. I think we're getting started. So, hello everyone and welcome. This is the How to Create Compelling Audio panel here. We are all hanging out. We are ready to talk about this, and I hope that you are ready to hear how to create compelling audio. I am Christiana Ellis, and I'm the moderator for this panel. I have been podcasting for a long time, since 2006. I have created a couple of audio dramas and audiobooks that have won, awards here and there, and that was a long time ago. And I am mostly doing little personal projects since. But we also have on our panel Veronica Giguere.
Hello.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and where you come from and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm Veronica Giguere, or V. I have been podcasting since 2006/2007. I don't remember. I started, it was a postpartum fog after my second child. So someone asked me to help out and I couldn't say no. And here I am. Since then, I've produced a couple podcasts, I've narrated them, and I've been able to turn my love of podcast fiction and writing into my full-time gig. I am an audiobook narrator. I've narrated over 70 titles and still going strong.
Fantastic. All right. We also have Mike Luoma.
Hey, and I'm too a longtime podcaster. Started in 2006, so go back a ways. I'm a science fiction author and an audiobook narrator as well, and I have my career is in radio, so I've been doing audio since a long time ago. I've spent the last 38 years or so in radio. When I start to think about how long that is, man. But I've been doing the Glow in the Dark radio podcast since 2006, and actually just put out the 15th anniversary edition of my Vatican Assassin, which was my first podcast fiction book. But I did a new edition, and I had a whole bunch of great podcasters and voice actors volunteer and do voice cameos, and Veronica was the governor as part of that. So thank you, V, once again for doing that. But that is available now, and I'm actually doing that on the podcast right now. I'm presenting that Vatican Assassin 15th anniversary edition, and also has Polly Cooley is on there, and Keith Hughes, John Miro, Starla Hutchton, Dave Robinson, and Scott Sigler are all doing voice cameos on this new Vatican Assassin.
Very nice. A lot of podcasting and Balticon all-stars there.
Yeah, a lot of people I've known from audiobooks and on forward. Mm-hmm. So,
and last but not least, Elora Malott.
Is that Malott?
Malott. Elora Malott. Welcome.
Hello. Some of you may know me as one of the many techs and volunteers who is running around Balticon, making sure stuff doesn't go horribly wrong, or if it does, figure out how to make it work anyway. So yeah, and I have recorded when when there was the eating the way across the dang, I forget the name of the podcast, but I remember it was a couple years ago, and Scott brought donuts. You know, you have a donut, talk about your experiences at Balticon, and but yeah.
Well, welcome. So according to the program, we were also supposed to have Jay Smith, but I'm informed that his internet is, the internet gods are currently preventing him from joining us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And so I have some questions and discussion topics prepared, but if you out there in the audience have questions or anything, you can put those in the Q&A function here in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that so we can discuss those things as well. Because one of the things that's certainly true about how to create compelling audio is that there's a lot of subjectivity there. Not everyone necessarily agrees on what's compelling. There's a lot of different approaches and styles and all of that sort of thing. But to start us off, I will pose a question to the panel. how important is technical audio quality to you? Does it have to be perfect to be compelling? Veronica, let's start with you.
Oh, that's really hard. Um, I think you have to consider what technical is. Are you talking about technical in your production or technical in your performance?
I
I
well, go ahead. Sorry.
because I think that depending on the medium, technical and performance is a lot more subjective. And there's certain things that someone may do that are technically correct, but they don't connect with the listener. Whereas if you're performing something that's not as technically correct, but there's heart in it, people are going to hear that and forgive the little, the little inconsistencies, the little mistakes.
Mike?
I think that I went right for the technical, audio quality side of things as opposed to the performance side. And if it isn't right for me, I can't listen too long.
Mhm.
I think some people are a little more forgiving, but there's also like unconscious stuff that goes on. So if there's like too much high end or something, it will make you tired and you won't want to listen to it for too long. So there are technical aspects that can actually work against your audio being compelling.
Yes. So what about you, Elora? What do you think?
I happen to agree with both Veronica and Mike that the technical aspect is important, and like what Mike was saying, if technically there are like significant flaws, then the audio itself won't draw the listener. It doesn't seem like if you're having technical issues as far as audio goes, it's not going to draw you in. You can have the best performance from an audio standpoint, but if you're hurting from a technical standpoint, if like the sound quality isn't there like you need it to be, then yeah, it's not going to draw the listener in.
So one of the ways in which I have uh, failed in my obligations as moderator is in not looking up this particular quote that I'm about to refer to. And I'm going to paraphrase it too. Not only do I not know who said it, but I don't even have it quite right. But the gist of it is that this is in the context of movies as opposed to just audio alone. But the idea was that your video, your picture can look all number of different ways and it would just be interpreted as style. But if the audio is bad, no one will watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that that was really interesting. And it, certainly when you're audio only, that's the only thing you have working for you. But I think it's also true that like an irritating hum or clicking in audio can make something essentially unlistenable. Um, but that said, I think it's certainly true that there is a like a range, right? Not everybody has the same things. One person's unlistenable is fine to another person. You have audio files and so on. But do you think so? I guess what it comes down to is a lot of things that intimidate people when they start getting into audio production is like, what level of gear do you need, right? And this goes along with the technical perfection. So what would you say for, let's say, as different, I'm sorry, I didn't phrase this as smoothly as I intended, for the various different types of audio that you might produce, what do you consider the bare minimum as far as gear to make listenable audio? Let's start with Mike.
I'm not sure that gear is as important as using it properly, because I use a lot of really low end gear, but the thing I don't skimp on is the software. So I actually use a good recording software. I'm still using Adobe Audition, and the reason I've stuck with that is I know how to use it inside and out, and I can make anything sound good using that. But I'm still using a Yeti microphone, and I'm directly USBing into my computer, and I do that for my audio recording. So I'm not so sure it's necessarily the gear as it is the knowledge behind it, maybe.
Mhm. But to be sure, you still need a microphone, you need software for editing, uh, etc., right?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, okay, that kind of a bare minimum, but you can do that, with Audacity, which is free, and a Yeti microphone, which is about $120 or something.
Mhm.
You can start for, I don't want people to have the idea you have to go out and buy a lot of expensive gear to get started.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's part of what I'm trying to tease out with these first two questions is on the one hand, it's important for the audio to sound good, but does that mean you have to have the best gear? So let's try to, where's the tension in there? So, Elora, do you have thoughts on that?
Um, trying to think. Because most of my, I'm not just a gamer. I've also performed in concert band for my local college and in high school, and it's just acoustics also matter too. Like you can like even what Mike's saying, like you can even use like low end gear. I mean, look, high school music departments aren't getting the money they need anyway. Another topic for another time. Anyway, you can still make something sound good so long as what Mike was saying, you know how to edit out all like the non-essential sounds. And it like acoustics really do matter because I performed in high school and in college, like open air like concert venues and all, or like the ceiling was like really high and like it kind of like arched out, or it was like an open space, but the acoustics were good enough to where you could still hear us. You could still hear the flute parts, which can be a little quiet, but you know, but that's from a musical standpoint. And I, again, like I said, like I I personally would think acoustics would matter for audio, not just in music, but also for like audiobooks and you're reading something or what have you. So
Hmm.
but that's my background because I also played flute in high school and in college. So
I just remember high school band where I played trumpet and still nobody could hear anything but the drums. Um, and so, what do you think, Veronica? Where's the balance between best gear versus listenable audio? How do you?
Well, it's at the core of it, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Hmm.
So you're getting whatever hardware, whatever gear you have that lets you get the clearest read in. I mean, I don't have a top of the line mic, and it works well for my voice. I mean, if this is something that you're going to keep doing, if you're looking at podcasting a bunch, if you're looking at narrating audio, then you start to get into the bit of what microphone style fits, my voice and, how I speak and what I'm going to put out there. But you don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get that gear. And I know plenty of professionals who get one microphone and they stick with it for decades. Like you have to pry it out of their cold, dead hands because they love that microphone. When it comes to your space, after, after studios shut down, you had a lot of, people going to their closets and going to their libraries, going to places that were just naturally insulated in their homes or apartments. And that's fine. That's acoustically sound. I mean, I have a booth, but I do this all day. And I do mean all day. But I started out in a closet with clothing. It was just, I wasn't paying extra. I was just, it was me and my wardrobe. So you can build and scale with what you have. Your space does not necessarily have to be a barrier if you take the time to treat it with what you have.
Great. So with all that in mind, kind of just following right off of that point, what is your favorite or the coolest little home audio production trick that you've learned? Just some little thing where you discovered, oh, I can do X and it makes things sound better.
I don't know, because I had to deal with this just recently, and it was as dumb as it sounds, it was posture. Literally, it was being able to sit up and sit back and, have that like straight spine. You can have somebody putting a knuckle in the back of your lumbar vertebrae and you sit up straight, but that it improved airflow, it improved projection. Yeah, those little tiny hacks, posture and hydration.
Pardon me while I adjust my microphone and sit up a little straighter.
That's okay. I'm gonna sip my water while I do this.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna straighten up my posture too, come to think of it. That was one thing that my high school band teacher was telling us, especially some of us who tend to, get slouched like this in a chair or something. We were always told, no, you straighten your posture. And we even had like these god awful, uncomfortable chairs. They were horrible, but they did the trick.
So,
I've got like, I'm sorry.
I was, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to talk about, I've got like little tricks I use on Adobe, like, a certain noise reduction setting, and then I follow that up with certain click reduction. And so I actually do a lot of like molding of the sound, and depending on what I'm doing it for, I'll end up doing more or less. Like if I'm doing something that's just going out on the internet once for an internet radio station, or it's, like a internet radio commercial or something like that, that'll get a certain level. But if it's something I'm doing for an audiobook, I have to take it a few steps further and do some additional mastering and such. So but it's like, I have my tricks. It's like, it's hard to say what those are because they're intricate and part of the program, but I think you develop those kind of things in time, the same way you get a mic that works for you. You kind of figure out what little things you need to do after the fact to make it sound the way you want.
Very nice. So what about you, Elora? Do you have any cool tricks? Professional audio producers hate this one cool trick that they wish you knew. And also,
I mean, I've heard it said, and I don't know how true it is for Veronica and Mike, but for like, apparently for singers, like, do not consume dairy beverages, because apparently it make it okay, so it is true then. Okay.
It's totally true.
Yep.
I had to change my coffee creamer.
Oh no.
Yes.
Fat-free,
no,
yeah.
I found an awesome vegan coffee creamer that's fantastic. So I don't have to give it my coffee. But yeah, no, and I did that, and it totally made a difference.
Wow, because
but it's worth it.
Because like I said, like, because that's something that I read in magazines when I was a kid, like, oh, singers don't drink milk or whatnot. And I'm thinking, is that really true? And then you two just confirmed it. So, hey, okay.
You can also just brush your teeth ahead of time. I mean, that actually gets your mouth like working and gets the muscles going, and that can help with your enunciation and things in ways that you wouldn't even imagine. So there's little things that contribute along the way.
Yeah. I mean, look, basically the scope of my experience, if anyone in the audience has heard me shout either halfway across the hall, out, in the general public, either across the hall or across the ballroom, or hey, if you even hear me shout in my store, guess what? My test where I practice, Balticon, because we need to be able to hear each other. So, and honestly, main tent has been pretty good acoustically wise, because if I need to like shout halfway across the room to get someone's attention, I will do it. And because I'm a retail worker, I work for Dollar Tree, I have to shout, if I have to shout halfway across the store in case the PA system is down or something, yes, you better believe I'll do it. And I've done it. So,
So speaking of audio appropriate to the context, segue, we're there's obviously, when we talk about, it doesn't have to be just podcasting, but audio in general, there's all sorts of different formats that might have very different needs from a production perspective. You know, if you have a very simple podcast that's just one person talking into a microphone, ranging all the way to a, you know, fully produced, large cast audio drama with soundscapes, there's still a lot of choices to be made as far as production. How do you approach deciding what level of production is necessary for any given project? Mike, you want to start? There's that too
Well,
broad
I
a question.
well, I kind of stick to what I'm good at, which is doing the one person into a microphone sort of thing. So, um, the experience I have actually with more than one person is mixing sound for bands, and so I don't know. It's I think my area of expertise makes me more comfortable talking about just the one person to the one microphone sort of a situation.
And that's fine. So like, but even from there, deciding like how you want it to sound, and for that matter, we don't have to just talk about like sound quality. We could talk about production, meaning how much do you edit? Do you take out all the little clicks, mouth noises? Do you take out the ums? How do you decide what's the audio presentation necessary for a given project? And even if it's just, you know, whatever you work on.
I think for me, I like to be prepared with what I'm going to do, and I like to. I think that it should sound as natural as possible, so you don't want to do a lot of heavy editing. But it depends again on what you're presenting. I present my podcast fiction, and the fiction elements are highly produced, but the intro and the outro and a little bit of news that I do around those in the podcast, those aren't so produced. So there's even a slight difference in the sound of the production quality. You know, just it's I think one thing that I find important is when you're doing a one person mic approach and doing this sort of thing, you want to be talking right to a person as opposed to talking to a group. So I like to try to be very prepared. I'll put a lot of notes together, but all with the goal of sounding like I'm having a conversation with one person, even though I'm highly prepared. I've got notes. I'm doing all this. I think the trick of really sounding like you're casual is being well prepared.
Hmm. So as opposed to with Veronica with audiobooks, I'm sure that it's critical that it's edited to the point where only what is on the page is allowed to be in the audio, or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. A lot of it is you need to you need to read the words that are on the page. If I say a instead of the, that's going to be a retake because you need to stay as true to the author's words as possible. But you also do need to know your audience. And it's more a nonfiction thing than a fiction thing. But you need to know who you're talking to. Are you talking to that small group? In some cases, are you talking to a larger room? Or is it that one-on-one, consulting, almost, therapist conversation aspect? When you're talking about, and also, sorry, one other thing to consider is the medium that you're putting out, because listeners for podcasts versus listeners for audio dramas versus listeners for audiobooks, they all expect really different things. If you soundscape an audiobook, a lot of times listeners are going to dock you for it because they don't want any noise. They don't want any chimes. They want the narrator and they want the words, and that's it. Whereas if you're looking for audio dramas or podcasts, the listeners expect embellishment. They expect more of an experience. And I think we've all known.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
You there?
Veronica, I think you froze.
We've got a frozen Veronica.
Oh
So
no.
Hopefully she'll come back in a moment, but do you want to jump in, Elora? Do you have thoughts on this? And it could be things that you've
Authors
worked
who
on,
started
or
out with podcasts.
There we go.
sorry, Veronica. Yeah, you were frozen
It's
there
okay.
for us for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, what I was saying was that I think we've all known people who started out with their fiction and podcasts, and now because of the different expectations that listeners have, they put out different versions of their work where they may have an audiobook version that has no embellishments, and then they'll also release, an audio drama or more soundscaped version for their, devoted, early adopter listeners who want that more immersive experience. So, kind of how we said at the beginning, it depends on what people expect from you. What is compelling audio?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, what about you, Elora? Do you have thoughts on this, either for your own
Um,
work or what you like from others?
like when I'm just starting to dip my toe in the water of like streaming, like because I am on Discord anyway, like I'll like stream something and like I'm getting used to like I think it's more so just liking the sound of my own voice. Like I like how I'm speaking now, but if I hear it recorded, unless it's been like unless the quality of the equipment and all is good, then it's like, oh god, I hate the sound of my voice when it's recorded. But at the same time, like getting used to like just like talking, and sometimes like it kind of feels like I'm talking into like dead air. But it's like just getting used to like hearing myself talk when I do start streaming more, but like hearing like at the very least like not so much like the game audio, but hearing like whoever is streaming when I do watch those, or like if I'm watching like say like hearing the audio, that like oftentimes that is enough like to be able to hear like nothing else, like just whoever is speaking, and like yeah. uh, oh
So, we've got some folks speaking in the chat and some good points being made there. I will go ahead and remind everyone that if you do have questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A, the question and answer format, and we can talk about any of those. But one thing that Mark Kilfoyle has mentioned there in the chat is talking about consistency of audio. And so how do you approach trying to make sure your audio is as consistent as possible, Veronica?
For me, the consistency comes in with fiction. It's making sure I've got the voices straight. I've recorded stuff that has 40, 50 characters over a decade of stuff. And so keeping those voices straight, it's making samples. It's recording the voice once and saving a little snippet of a file, or making notes to reference. It's listening to what you've done before, and nobody likes the sound of their own voice. It's very, very there are professional audiobook narrators and performers who will purposely record without their headphones on because they can't stand to hear themselves. I get distracted when I hear myself. So it's totally not you.
okay, good. That makes me feel a little better, because like going back to the podcast that I was recorded on, I thought I sounded fine, and it's just yeah, like
Nobody
yeah.
likes the
Okay.
sound of their
We're
own
all
voice
used to
with that.
we're all used to hearing our own rib cage, and our bodies give us more internal bass and resonance.
Mhm.
So when we hear our own voices in our heads, we're hearing it with a much deeper tone than what everybody else is actually hearing. Your voice sounds like it does to everybody else the way you hear it coming back on a recording. I hate to break the news to you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's because you have a bone structure, and it creates a resonance inside of you that you have that difference. And once you get used to it, yeah, you can get used to hearing your own voice. There's times I still will do recording without my headphones on, And that's usually if I need to sound more natural. I find that putting the headphones on puts me into a kind of like a more announcery space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's why I have like
The
right,
one.
because my thing's mirrored. Because I have the one headphone off, so I don't sound like I'm shouting halfway across the room.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common experience for a lot of people to find the sound of their own voice recorded somewhat unsettling. I think there might just be kind of a neurology thing happening there because it sounds different. There's maybe an uncanny valley sort of effect where it's familiar enough, but just enough different to be disturbing sometimes. But in any case, I think that let's see what we're starting to.
Yeah,
I'm
apparently there's
looking
a
at.
storm. There's
Oh,
a yeah, according to the chat, someone said that there is a major thunderstorm.
well, so I was just going to say though that if if people have questions, please do go ahead and submit them. We will definitely talk about those. So we can talk about lots of stuff to fill the hour, but I'm just saying if you want us to talk about something in specific, please put it in the question and answer. So when it comes down to um, compelling audio, like what do we mean by that? Because certainly, as we talked about, something that has an unpleasant sound that makes you want to stop listening, obviously not compelling, right? But
Right.
let's go further as far as like, what are the positive qualities of compelling audio? And this doesn't, again, it doesn't have to just be the technical sound of it. And we're also talking slightly different from the content. Like in an audiobook, you have the text of the novel, right? But how do you make that compelling audio? Is that a broad? Well, you know what? Nobilis actually just asked in maybe a slightly different way than I was going for. How would you make reading the phone book compelling?
You do your best. I mean, I've read a book, an audiobook, which was just astronomical information. So it was talking about the distance that planets were from the sun, what black holes were made of, and you just do your best to relate that information in such a way that it sounds interesting. You've got to inhabit it to some degree, even if it's dry as bone dry dust in the desert. You've got to be able to sound like you're interested in it, even if you're not. I guess that's the bottom line. Is that's what you're doing, is you're kind of like giving it life even if it doesn't really have any.
Yeah, there was a really interesting. This was addressed actually this morning on a Clubhouse chat I was listening to while I was walking, and the narrator in question, she had just narrated a news article that was going to be distributed later, and someone said, "How do you narrate something that's so dry and boring?" And her immediate response was, "It's not dry and boring to me, and it wasn't dry and boring to the person who wrote it."
Yeah.
So if it's boring to you, well, set yourself aside, and there's somebody out there who's going to find it interesting. Act like you're that person. So, and that's really it. It interested someone enough for them to write it. Act like that person. So somebody's going to find the phone book compelling. I'm not sure who. I know I actually got this challenge because June is audiobook month, and a bunch of people are doing different challenges out on social media. We all had to sign up for one, and I literally signed up for the day to read the phone book or read a piece of the phone book and make it more interesting. So when I do know, Billis, I will tag you and let you know, and hopefully it'll be interesting. But somebody has to like the ad in the yellow pages. They paid for it.
Yeah, sure, they did.
Yeah, audio format's not most optimized for the utility of phone books generally, but you would just have to put timestamps, I think, in your episode notes, right? Uh, starting at 3 hours and 47 minutes is B. B names. What about you, Elora? Do you have thoughts on how would you make the phone book compelling?
Oh God. Try, like, if it's like, God, you know what? I I honestly don't know how I would make it compelling. I would probably like have to, if it's like an ad for something, maybe make it sound like exciting or something. Like I'm an advertiser on television or something, and make it so, this is really interesting, and be excited about it, and like use my voice, use the tone of my voice to like talk about it, or like make, or basically hype it up. And
Features a
like,
cast of thousands.
and okay, let's see, I'm checking. You have to read the index to the reading of the phone
Oh,
book.
well, I
Oh
think he's
God.
talking about my podcast notes idea. So, so Mark Kilfoyle also asks in the Q&A here, can you talk about using pacing, volume, intensity, and other vocal tricks to make things more compelling? And I think this comes a little bit to what you were saying earlier, Veronica, just the idea of like, be the person who is not bored by the content, but like to get more technical to it, like what does that mean? Like how do you make it sound not boring beyond the attitude of it?
Well, from what Mark said about pacing, volume, intensity, pacing obviously is how fast you speak. So you could make something interesting by slowing it down. And, your classic Tim Curry quiver with anticipation. Nobody said say it. I'm so hurt. Oh my gosh. And then volume, obviously rising up and down, not necessarily yelling and not necessarily whispering, because you don't want that much sibilance on your microphone, but hardening and softening your voice, kind of putting those edges or taking them off. And the intensity, I think maybe a better way to communicate that is like the purpose, like how committed are you in that reading? If someone's a little unsure, it's going to back off. It may almost be wishy-washy versus someone who's going to hammer every single point home. And you can play with those three components. You could have someone who is speaking very quickly, but they're not very intense, and they could be really high pitched, and that just comes off as nerves. But a lot of it is playing with that and knowing what you can do. And if you're not sure with those three things, it's going with your gut. Whenever you're bringing words to life, you always prep, you always read beforehand, but kind of get a feel for it. Make notes like, oh, this person seems unsure, or this person seems really confident, or knowing later on that this, seemingly innocuous situation is going to develop into something big. And so getting ready for that emotional ride. But using those tricks and just kind of embodying that, you're not just doing a voice, you're doing a whole performance. People are only just hearing it. So, and don't be afraid to use your hands, use your body, your torso, your head. Be aware for consistency that you need to stay close, your little box for your microphone, and don't flail and hit things. Been there, done that. But those are all tricks you can use, and it comes with practice, and you can't be afraid to be silly. You can't go too far.
Well, so what about you, Mike? I mean, obviously you're presenting things like that. It's a little different, right? It's not a dramatic reading of a fictional story necessarily, but it's, or it could be. Sometimes it is,
Sometimes it
but
is, yeah.
sometimes it is. But when you're doing other, like more conversational things, how do you? Because you mentioned before wanting it to sound natural, but there's a difference between sounding natural and actually just using your raw audio without, or I guess you can answer the question instead of me trying to sideways pack your answer in the question for you.
I because I've done so much radio over time, I really do like the live sound. So I don't want to edit very much when I'm in that kind of a situation. And again, I think it comes down to prep because part of um, when I'm in a situation like that, it's respecting the audience, or if you're in an interview, respecting the other person to be prepared so that because as the narrator or the person who's in charge, you never want to sound, unless you're doing a character voice, you don't want to sound like you're unsure or uncertain, because that's not going to be compelling. um, unless that's what you're going for, unless you're going for something where you want to sound like you don't know what's going on, and that's your underlying cause, but that's a whole niche of its own. I think it's interesting. There's different things you can do depending on what you're going for. So like if I'm trying to relate to somebody one-on-one, I'm going to be more conversational. But if I'm trying to get a point across, I might be more intense, and I might lower my voice a little bit so that I'm coming across with a little bit more authority and maybe a little bit more threat. um, so there's things you do when I'm reading, like for dramatic purposes. If I'm reading a woman's voice, I put more breath into my speech, so that when I read her, I don't want to sound like I'm mocking or effeminate, but I want it to sound like a woman's voice. So there's different things you do to to bring the different voices to life. And even when you're just doing a narration that doesn't have characters, the narrative voice is a voice, and you got to decide what that voice is and how you're going to deliver it. And sometimes it'll go like there was one audiobook that I did that went against what I would usually do for my narration, because it was a book on business and it was about the speed of business in the 21st century. He had me read everything really fast. Not a choice I would have made on the book, not the way I would have delivered it, but I had to bring that across and deliver that consistently. And that, I think, taught me a lot about maintaining a level that I wasn't comfortable at, but I had to be at. And so it's really dependent on your situation, what you're going to bring in to give it that kind of. Those are all, I guess, tools of the trade.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Sure.
coming up
Well,
short.
that's fine. Like certainly reading things too fast is kind of a rookie narrator trait generally, but certainly another important narrator quality is being able to deliver what the client wants in cases where it's work for hire, right? But one thing that you mentioned is the idea of wanting the live sound so it's not too heavily edited. But one of the things that's valuable in that circumstance is trying to train yourself to not say too much, and to have to speak in a way that you don't have to heavily edit, but also doesn't sound like someone just stammering over and over again.
I do have something for that because of radio. I mean, for years working in radio, I had to do what they call sound checks, where you listen to yourself. And that's what I'm going to tell you to do, is listen to yourself. We were talking earlier about how you don't like to hear your own voice, but listen to yourself over and over. If you record something that's a conversation, listen to it, because you're going to drive yourself nuts with your ums, and you're going to stop. Or at least that's
Well,
the way it worked for me.
you're going to want to stop.
Yeah, well, I think You
But
got to train
wanting to
yourself out of it.
yeah.
But one way to do that is by listening to yourself doing it.
You have to be aware there's a problem first. Right. Yeah.
True.
Um, so, Elora, I'm sorry. I keep wanting to call you
It's oh,
Melora.
it's okay.
Uh,
Ah,
do you have thoughts on this this topic of like pacing, volume, the vocal presentation? What sort of
um, uh, I guess most of my experience, like I said, like from like when I've watched movies, from when I've played video games and all, like there are ways to tell the actor is only doing it for a paycheck. Because look, voice actors, y'all need to make money too, right? I mean,
ideally?
That's good.
of course. And then there are other times you can tell they're really passionate, and it's like as soon as you hear the voice, you can easily point to the actor and be like, "You're so and so," and that's all that gets locked into your head. Like that's all. They can do other things, but it's like it depends on like the delivery of a role, and also in movies too. Like they could have like a great physical performance, but it's how they speak too that you can tell if someone sounds wooden or if they sound like boring. Or I've had many lectures at college where you can tell a professor has sound bored to tears of a subject, but due to contract obligations, they have to teach this. I have had a professor like this, and said class was a nightmare. And then you can tell like other times where a professor, if it's a certain subject that is in that they have to teach, but you can tell they're excited, how they speak when they are given the lecture, that is going to draw me in. That will make me pay attention. Like if you're interested in whatever it is you're teaching, it could be about the most boring, the most god awful topic in the world. But if you're passionate about it, yeah, sure, I'll listen to you talk about it. Sure.
So I don't know exactly how we are for timing because I don't think there's
Oh,
anything after us, right?
I
Or
don't believe so.
well, but I think we
Mhm.
are coming to the end of the
Yeah.
scheduled program time. So,
I
uh,
just double checked. So,
okay. So we don't, not that we have to rush away or anything, but maybe we just everyone can kind of plug what else you've got going on this weekend.
yeah, I'll volunteer myself for this. If I mean, I can be found on Discord helping people navigate Discord, helping people, directing people where they belong, where they need to go. I'm also doing 3 other panels this weekend, unless something else comes up and I decide to heck with it, I'll volunteer myself because why not? Um, I'm also doing Mary Shelley and the first pandemic science fiction novel. I'm also doing Stepping Outside Your Genre Comfort Zone. And the last panel I'm doing is Future Utopia or Tacitly Terrifying. Those are my next 3 panels that I'm doing, bearing anything else doesn't go wrong. But it's Balticon, so something probably will. I've been doing Balticon since Balticon 44, so yeah. Uh,
All right, great. What about you, Mike?
Well, I'm going to be doing moderating the dynamic voice acting panel coming up on Sunday night at 8:30. So I'll see a couple of you guys again.
Yep.
And that's about all. I did a reading earlier tonight where I read from a brand new Alibi Jones novel I'm working on. But otherwise, I'm hawking my wares from this year and years past. So glowinthedarkradio.com. Go to my place.
There you go. All right, what about you, Veronica?
Let's see. So tomorrow night at 10 p.m., I will be part of the cast of This Kaiju Life, which is loads of fun, awesome audio drama. one of the best parts of Balticon, I think, is like peeking in on all of the live performance panels. You don't want to miss this. The last one I was at, I was in tears, laughing, in live, falling on the floor. It was that good. You have to see it. 10 o'clock tomorrow night.
Those are the best things.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And then Sunday at 8:30, dynamic voice acting, which literally is my favorite panel ever for Balticon. Because inevitably I wind up laughing myself out of my chair or bawling, and I have to find Kleenex and fix my eye makeup. And then Monday at 11:30, I have a reading, and I'm 99% sure it will be from a new Secret World Chronicle project that's coming up. So that's what's going on. Other than that, let's see, new releases. I just had a new audiobook come out that I narrated called Spaceship Thrive, space opera. Think Firefly meets The Expanse. So Firefly meets The Expanse meets Golden Age of the Solar Clipper. So loads of fun, lots of good characters. The series is by Ginger Booth, and the second one will be coming out soon.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Oh, I have the best job ever. And otherwise, you can find me at voicesbyveronica.com.
Great.
Ding.
So I'm Christiana Ellis. I'm on a number of other panels this weekend. I'm going to be on the dynamic voice acting panel as well on Sunday. I'm looking forward to that. It's always fun. But tomorrow, I'm also at 10 a.m. going to be on character development before the curtain goes up, which could apply to fiction, but is specifically about creating gaming characters, tabletop role-playing game characters. How much backstory should you have? Then also, I am on at 1 p.m. Love the Setting, Hate the System, which is once again about adapting different role-playing game systems and rules, mixing, matching where you need to. And also at 4 p.m. tomorrow, good first-time RPGs, in parentheses, that aren't D&D. So lots of gaming content tomorrow, but you can also find all of the stuff that I do at christianaellis.com. So I think we probably are coming to the end of the Zoom portion of this panel, but I don't know who of you is available to hang out in the Mount Washington Discord chat. We could continue chatting there if anybody feels inclined to do that. So
I'll stop by.
Sure. Definitely
sure.
pop in.
So yes, like I said, we are in the Mount Washington room, is the room intended for this purpose. And the last panel before us had a lot of people talking all about that all the way up until halfway through our panel. So got to talk in there a little bit, at least to not be just shamed. So join us over there. And but in the meantime, thank you everyone for coming to our panel, and we hope you found it informative and ideally fun.
Well, I will say that honestly, like this has been a whole learning experience for me. Like this is my first Balticon that I'm a panelist. I'm a talking head. So it's like, new.
Well, welcome. You did great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So, do we need to do anything else, or we're all done? Or
let me see if I can ping. Let me see if I can ping me.
Dear audience, I'm currently tap dancing. You can't tell because the camera is up on my face, and I'm not wearing my tap shoes. But
let me see if I can ping. Hobbit. Be like,
sure.
be like, just go poke.
Yeah. Well, like all of the, we definitely need a round of applause for all of the tech folks at this convention, because to be sure, always important, but, these virtual conventions in particular, none of it could exist at all without the tech. So very important to show them some love.
Like, I will say that, like, my work schedule actually played nice to where, I could, learn how to use Zoom properly. And I think I'm doing okay. I mean, Okay, Hobbit says he's in another Zoom trying to sort out some car stuff.
Oh, okay. Do we just close out here, or do we?
Yeah, I think, I think we can. Okay, yeah. Let me.
I just don't want to mess up the recording or anything.
Look. I'm trying to like wrangle him back here. So
No worries. Like I think it's just, this is after credits cookie
yeah.
content for anyone who listens to our panel later,
Pretty
Mhm.
much.
or those of you who, who stayed with us and they knew that when the credits started rolling, you don't get up yet. No, not
No.
yet.
Ooh, yeah.
Post
Post
No,
credit
wait.
scenes.
because post credits are great.
I just-
Mid credit and post credit.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to see like Ant-Man and the Wasp, like well into the MCU run, and you still see people getting up as soon as the credits start, and I'm like,
I know,
what are
right?
you doing?
Don't get up! Don't get up! Sit down! Sit down!
But then I'm judgy about that sort of thing because I always watch all the credits. Doesn't matter about whether it's
Yeah.
MCU or that's a me thing, but I do judge people who don't do it.
Like, I mean, everyone who works on stuff, like, we bust our butts to make sure the audience has a good time. They enjoy the work and all, and so I'm like trying to. Oh, come on, Hobbit. I'm done here. I mean, you're the one hosting this. Just, yeah.
But like it's one of the things though that's interesting about the virtual convention, I didn't do it last year just because I think in my head, the biggest part of what I love about conventions just generally is that hanging out with folks that I don't get to see very often and just sitting around chatting and that sort of stuff. And so I was feeling like, well, virtual con just won't really have that, but here we are.
Yeah.
It's not the same as in person, but
No.
It's not.
Go ahead, Veronica.
I was going to say a lot of times, we go to the con so that we can, step aside from our everyday personas. I mean, for me, it's like, hey, I can go someplace and not have to worry about children. This is fantastic. And I can, I'm only responsible for one person, and it's great. And, I can go and see people and I can just sit and listen and kind of, eavesdrop, because seriously, that's all I'm doing. I'm sitting and eavesdropping the entire time and playing with crochet. But it's unwinding. It's fun. And it just to feed off all the creativity around and to see people. It's just this geeky feast for the eyes and the soul. I don't get that in my house.
Honestly, like the way I see Balticon, it's my own little vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Get away from my store, get away from Dollar Tree. Like, I need away from the store because, it's just like, okay, I know Memorial Day is coming up. Not my problem. Have fun, everybody. See you in a few days.
Yep. Yep.
So
I'm looking at the participant list, and we've got a few people still hanging out.
Couple diehards.
I'm impressed. Like, to the 4 people we have watching, you know what? I'm very impressed.
Hi.
Hi.
I opened up in Discord too, but
Okay. Yeah.
I'll have to hop and change machines. There is no Discord on this machine.
Right.
Oh.
Probably because if there was, I'd never get any work done.
well, yeah.
Yes, crocheting
Discord.
was mentioned. I have yarn, and I've been for the past couple, because I've done Zoom coaching and
There's Hobbit.
classes. And so, well, this is horribly tangled. And so I've sat here for the
Oh,
past, I don't
no.
know how many Zoom sessions working to untangle it, which is great.
Okay.
Yes, we do need to wrap this.
Yes.
We just
All
All right. Well,
help
we're on.
us. Help
Yes.
us. We're trapped.
End it.
This is where we realize, oh no, it's been purgatory this whole time. No, see, now our Zoom window has to spin around like the Phantom Zone in Superman.
Yeah, it's the Phantom Zone. Ah!
Okay, we're good. If you can hear us, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Oh.
And away we go. I shall see you all on Discord.
All right, great. I'll be over there too.
Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.